Fraud is rampant in this system. You look at who's making the decisions, you look at who's in control, and you find that they are colluding with each other, with the politicians, to make decisions that do not benefit us, and they benefit themselves. But the unfortunate thing is that a time has come where a collapse is far overdue. Let's get into some of the reasons why, and this will be unrefutable. China finds $15 billion of loans backed by fake gold trades. So looking at China's chief auditor discovering $15 billion of loans backed by falsified gold transactions, adding to the possible signs of fraud in the commodities financing deals, something that GATA has been looking at for years now. And we look at the leased gold and we find that it is such a joke that there is actually only a fraction of actual physical metal for the amount of gold that they say there is. This would mean a multiplication of the price of gold should they ever actually find the truth. Now, whether that'll happen or not, let's just go on. Of much of the $160 billion in transactions projected by Goldman, of course that's Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest criminals, $80 billion may involve gold. So here we have up to $80 billion worth of falsified gold transactions that is going on in the system. This is in one special case. Who knows how much there is around there? Is there any gold in Fort Knox? Who knows? Perhaps, but we don't know. We'll never know. And the truth of the matter is that this gold has been leased out. The gold isn't there. It's not in the vaults. Let's go on. This is right here out of Jim Rickards, for those who have read it, an incredible book, Currency Wars. First of all, he talks about the 0 hour. The price of the physical gold starts to run away from the paper price. I've talked about this in all of my interviews practically, saying that the price that we have of this physical metal does not correspond to the price you see on the tickers. And that's because that's the paper price. This is a totally fraudulent number that they just make up. Who knows how much is actually out there? But the real metal's value is considerably higher, and that's something that we may or may not ever get to. However, they're calling that the 0 hour. So that is something to look forward to in the future. But what remains is that the price that we see isn't real. And basically what he goes on to say is that they lease all their gold out, and essentially they're doing this with a scheme that they can borrow money practically at free rates, and they can sell things that are higher than these numbers of, let's say, 5%, and they can make a considerable profit and not have to do absolutely anything. Let's go on. This right here is all of the debt in the US, and here you have $60 trillion. This is a combination of all the debt, public, private, so on and so forth. And here you have all sectors, credit market instruments, liability, and so on. And basically what it says is that we have about $60 trillion. This is impossible to pay back. There is no footing on this ground whatsoever. It is ready for a collapse. $60 trillion absolutely positively cannot pay back. If you can outgrow $60 trillion, even in the USA, this is not going to happen. I don't care what anybody says. I consistently have arguments with finance, people in the finance industry, telling me that don't worry, we'll outgrow the problem. The fact remains is that you cannot outgrow the $60 trillion of debt. It can't happen. Let's go on. This is basically another form of debt, $223 trillion, the total indebtedness of the world, including all parts of the public and private sectors, amounting to over 300% of the GDP. Here is showing you that it's just not just the US that's indebted, it is all countries around the world, because they've committed to this scheme of central banking, which devalues the currency all the way to the bottom. Here you have well over $200 trillion, hundreds of percent greater than the GDP. So even when you use those manipulated GDP numbers, you're still unable to gather this $223 trillion of debt. They have gone far beyond. There has to be something huge that's going to take place in the future. What will happen here, I'm not 100% sure. However, you can be rest assured that your currency will be destroyed. let's go on. What I talked about in my book was that we have the derivative scheme, the whole finance scheme. We have at the bottom, the little tiny triangle at the bottom there, if you can even see it, it says real assets. And that is basically the real economy. On top of that, you have fractional reserve banking. Fractional reserve banking is essentially how you lend them $1, they can lend out 10. And this is a scheme that allowed them to profit so massively. But then they had to create something called derivatives. And derivatives are something that I've covered many times before, but essentially they are completely fraudulent schemes, allowing them to maximize their profits and make gigantic gains that they could not do before. And if you look at the ratio, of course, this is not the scale or anything, but basically that the derivatives sitting on top of the fractional reserve banking, on top of the real assets, mark something that can never, absolutely, positively never be paid back. And this is why we will have a collapse, because debt has gone so far beyond reason that we are unable to dig ourselves out of this hole. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up. I'll continue to make more like it. And of course, do not forget to be an insider. The insider is where all the best intel is, and it is totally free. It's at themoneygps.com. At the bottom, you fill in your email address and you get occasional emails from me.